Who are the Sun Devils that we didn't see contribute a year ago that could contribute this year? We're going to talk about it on this edition of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. A special shout out to my everydayers that are here every day, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcast, and stay in touch with the show by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. All right, guys, we are in the heat of the offseason, no pun intended, as Arizona is slowly but surely starting to heat up. But we've got a lot to talk about between now and the start of training camp. Part of that speculation can go towards who's going to be playing, who's not going to be playing, who are some breakout guys, stuff like that. And that's what we're going to be starting out here on Locked On Sun Devils. And I think the best place to start is by talking about guys who didn't have big seasons a year ago that could have bigger seasons this year. Now, let me go ahead and preface it with this. This is not saying these guys are going to break out and be like all conference players. This isn't even saying that they're so much going to be like starting positional guys. What I think is that these three guys that I'm about to highlight are in for bigger roles than they were last year. So, in some instances, these guys maybe dealt with injury. And if they weren't dealing with injury, they wouldn't be on this list because I think they would have started, but that's part of the conversation. Another part of the conversation is maybe the depth that was ahead of them was a little too deep, and now that depth is not as prevalent, so they'll have another opportunity. And then maybe there's guys that are just looking at new fits in a new scheme that could potentially produce big-time roles. That's the three scenarios that I have here for these three guys that I'm about to get into. And let's go ahead and start off with probably the biggest name of these three players here, a former four-star recruit and a guy who ended up being able to take a redshirt season a year ago because he did not participate enough consistently, and that's Tevin White. Tevin White appeared in just 3 games last year, recording 14 carries for 67 yards, no touchdowns, and then a single catch for 8 yards. 8 of his 14 carries came in week 1 against NAU, and he did have a 16-yard scamper on those, or of those 29 yards, 16 of them came on one little carry. So we did not get to see a lot of Tevin White, but Tevin White is a former 4-star recruit out of Virginia. He was a top 30 running back in the nation. He's 6'1", he's 210. The dude is built like a pro running back. I know a lot of people made a very lazy comparison. He's Adrian Peterson because of the size and the fact that he wore 28. You will not find me making that comparison. I have not seen enough out of him to make a comparison. So until further notice, he's Tevin White. Tevin White is Tevin White. And he is exciting, but he's a very, very, very massive unknown for the Sun Devils right now. The reason why he finds himself on my list is looking at this running back depth chart. It's very unclear what's going to happen. Cameron Scannaboo is by far the number 1 running back on this team. There's other guys there for sure that I anticipate will have roles, but Scannaboo is far and away the best running back here. He's the most experienced running back here. And thanks to some injuries, he was the guy who got the most playing time during spring ball to stand out compared to another transfer into Carlos Brooks and Tevin White, who did not participate. But White should be good to go for training camp. And if he is good to go for training camp, I think it's going to be very hard to ignore the talent that White possesses. He is an athlete at 6'1", 210 who can run a lot quicker than you think, and he runs with power and authority too. He showed that off in the little bit of time that he was able to be out there, and you kind of looked at him and you were like, I wish I could see more. And it was frustrating that you only got to see him appear in 3 games last year, because Arizona State was a 3-win team and you wanted to see some more from the other guys that were on the roster. But that wasn't the case last year because X Valade was God, he wasn't even an all-conference guy, was he? I think he was a honorable mention, which is ridiculous, but he might have been second team. I can't remember. Point is, when Valladay was on the field, he was the best guy on ASU's offense. It made sense why guys behind him didn't get opportunity, but you do still wish that Tevin White could have gotten more chances than he did last year. He will have that opportunity this year, but he's going to have to prove it because he is going to be going up against some very talented guys in Scatterboon and Carlos Brooks. Javen Jacobs is translating from wide receiver to running back. George Hart is still on the roster. There's still going to be competition at the position. This isn't going to be a guaranteed role for Tevin White, which is one of the reasons why I prefaced the list with, hey, this isn't saying this is a breakout player. I'm not saying Tevin White's a 1,000-yard runner. I'm not saying he's the number one running back on the team, but I do think that he is going to be in for a much bigger role than he was a year ago. If Tevin White were to finish the year with 14 or fewer carries in 2023, there's just no way you can expect him to be on the roster in 2024. He would have to be either injured or just not a good football player. And I don't think that's the case for Tevin White. I think this is a very talented, very good football player that deserves that opportunity to show that he can be a starter for the team. That's the reason why he finds himself first on my list here. I just don't see any reason why you don't give him more of an opportunity than you did a year ago. It's a new coaching staff that didn't recruit Tevin White or anything like that. But nonetheless, this is still a team that's looking for star powers and contributors. And I think that Tevin White can be one of those guys. Guys, I want to talk to you about one of my absolute favorite sponsors that we've had on the show, and that's Birddogs, because Birddogs make you look good. They stretch like khaki shorts, and they're designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg that give you a truly sculpted look. Guys, I'm here to tell you that somebody like me who doesn't work out on a regular basis, these make my legs look good. I'm just saying. These will make you look good. They're comfortable too. They've got an anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long too. So not only are they comfortable, you're not going to stink. You can wear these more than once. They fit reliably. They're better than those regular shorts that have that stiff restricting cotton because they fix the issue with their cloud knit fabric that looks like that khaki but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without sacrificing movement. And they do the exact same thing as those Lululemons that I know so many people love, but they fit so much better. I'm telling you guys, these are my favorite pair of shorts that I have. I wear these as often as I can whenever I go out of the house. And right now, if you go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege, they will throw in a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. Again, that's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your bird dogs off, we promise you. Guys, you need to check out the Locked On NBA mock draft special. It's here. It's bigger than ever. Follow along the entire first round in a 6-episode ultimate mock draft experience that only Locked On can deliver. All episodes are available now on Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you're getting your podcasts. Back into our conversation, looking at the next player that I have up on my list here. It's going to be offensive lineman Joey Ramos. Ramos, of course, was a transfer last year from Iowa State. He wasn't a full-time starter there. He did have some playtime experience. He was mainly a special teamer, but he was looking to be a starter for Arizona State before he went down with a season-ending injury. Didn't get a chance after that, obviously. He's coming in this year, and this depth chart for the Sun Devils is certainly divisive, I think, is the best way I can put it. There's not really anybody that has a guaranteed starting spot except for Isaiah Glass at left tackle. Other than that, you will have Lee Fontanu competing with Ben Bray at center. Joey Ramos will be one of the guys that competes for a guard spot. You'll have Aaron Frost should be back from injury in time to start the year at right tackle. Emmett Bully's returning as one of the primary interior guys as well. There's some freshmen there like Sean Na. There's Bram Walden that I really like, who's a transfer from Oregon. There's a lot of uncertainty along the offensive line. There's no continuity for sure. Outside of Isaiah Glass, you could potentially be having 4 new starters from last year's team here. So looking at what we know versus what we don't know is very difficult because there's so much of what we don't know. But what we do know is that Joey Ramos was projected to be a starter last year, had the unfortunate injury, and should be able to come back at 100% and be ready to compete for that starting role that he was in line for again last year. With Joey Ramos, this is a very experienced guy. He's a redshirt senior. He's been around the block a lot. He knows what his expectations are for the team. He knows what his own expectations are for himself. And I still think that this is a good player. This now keep in mind, this was not an offensive line that performed particularly well during spring ball, but I think that also has to do with how great the defense looked. In the pass rush in particular, the defensive ends were just absolutely eating everything alive. I don't know if it's a scheme thing because Brian Ward is so smart, or if the offensive line is just going to need to step up big time. I think it might have been a good combination of the two of them, but I think that Joey Ramos is a more consistent guy, especially on the interior of the offensive line. I don't know. I look at Joey Ramos. I find it hard to believe he's not going to be right back into competition for a starting role for the team along the interior. There's just so much that has changed between last year and this year. You lost Ladarius Henderson. You lost Ben Scott, two key pieces on the interior of the line. Chris Martinez, who was a transfer last year, was a graduate transfer. He's no longer with the team. So when you're looking at what's there, there's a lot of transfers that are coming into the program. And some of them have good starting experience. Some of them are looking for that starting experience. Joey Ramos has starting experience from his days at Iowa State, and I don't know. I feel like that should culminate probably, but we'll see. Bottom line, I think here is that Ramos at least understands what's going on at Arizona State, but the other thing that would go against him a little bit is that it's a new system, it's a new coach. Again, similar to Tevin White, these aren't the same coaches that brought him in via the transfer portal to come to Arizona State. But there is one thing that is going for him, and that's that he's a hometown kid. Kenny Dillingham has preached that he wants the hometown kids to be able to drive this football team, and he wants the Activate the Valley to be the driving force for Arizona State. Joey Ramos is a Deer Valley High School graduate and somebody that definitely fits the mantra of what Kenny Dillingham is looking for here. This is what he's looking for along the entirety of his team, is the guys who buy into coming home and reintegrating Arizona State and turning them back into a winning program. Ramos can be one of the poster boys for that, which I think could play into his hand for what Dillingham's looking for. But at the end of the day, similar to Tevin White, I'm not necessarily guaranteeing Joey Ramos as a starter. Of the three guys we're talking about, I think Ramos has the easiest clear-cut path to be a starter between the other two, or between the last guy we're going to talk about and Tevin White. But the other thing that'll really help him is special teams. During his time at Iowa State, this was a big-time special teams contributor for the Cyclones, and Arizona State is a mess on special teams, and they're going to be looking for any kind of consistency that they can find out there, and Ramos can provide them that. So Ramos fits the bill as a special teamer, he fits the bill as a starter, and he fits the bill as a hashtag Activate the Valley kind of player. I feel like he's absolutely in line for a much bigger role in 2023 than he was a year ago, even if it was due to injury. One more time, thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure that you guys tune in next week as we take a look at the defensive side of the football and three guys that I anticipate will have bigger roles than they did have a year ago. Some guys much bigger than others. All right. Last guy, I really went back and forth here on who I wanted to go with. I ultimately decided to go with the guy who had a bigger role last year compared to his teammate. But this is still, we'll go ahead and it's Messiah Swinson is the guy that I'm picking here to have a bigger role and perhaps a breakout compared to Bryce Pierre was the guy I was going back and forth with. The ultimate tiebreaker was that Swinson did have more of a role last year than Bryce Pierre did, but that's still not necessarily guaranteeing that Swinson is going to be the number 2 tight end. I think what's going to help separate them is that Swinson is just such a big body, man. Like, if he were to add on 50 pounds, he would be playing offensive line. He's 6'8". Like, he's 6'8". He's 255 pounds. This is a big, massive man who looks like he should be playing for Bobby Hurley right now. But he came into last season as a potential starter for Arizona State before Jalen Conyers absolutely took off. But when Swinson was on the field, he was able to make himself a little bit of an impact. He caught 15 passes for 185 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't see any reason he can't be better in all 3 of those statistics. I think he can eclipse 15 catches. I think he can get north of 200 yards. I think he can get more than 2 touchdowns. This is just an offense that is going to really respect and incorporate the tight end position, which is the reason why I was so back and forth between him and Bryce Pierre. And Bryce Pierre has looked very good during spring practices, and he's a guy that I anticipate will be able to hopefully make some waves and get onto the football field a lot more often in 2023. With Messiah Swinson, though, you just have this rare matchup disadvantage that you can place on the field. There aren't defensive backs or linebackers that are 6'8". There's few guys that are 6'5". There's few guys that are 6'3" in the defensive backfield. Like, you just can't cover that kind of size. So if Swinson is able to refine himself as a receiver and he can become a better route runner or at least a better separator and just find a way to make an impact in the red zone, I feel like there's no telling how important he can be for the Sun Devils in 2023. The problem with projecting a role for Messiah Swinson is trying to figure out how many tight ends Arizona State is going to want to incorporate, because you do have Jalen Conyers coming back. And Conyers is a guy who many people believe is going to be an all Pac-12 kind of candidate. I think he's going to end up being one of the best tight ends in the country this year. And that makes it very difficult to project what you're going to do for Messiah Swinson. But I do think that there's going to be ample opportunity for people across multiple positions to audition themselves and try and make a case for Kenny Dillingham to get them involved early, often, and consistently. Messiah Swinson can do that, but it's going to be difficult because there's a lot of receivers. There's a lot of unknowns at the running back position with guys who can catch the football. Messiah Swinson could end up being worse than he was last year because of all the competition across the offense. But there's also a great opportunity for him to be better than he was last year. And that's where I'm leaning, is I think that Swinson is going to be better than he was a year ago. I think that Swinson is going to be somebody who ends up really surprising a lot of people and putting out a very, very good 2023 season. Those are the 3 guys that I think are due for bigger, more impactful years in 2023. Who do you guys think is going to have a bigger year? Who do you think is going to have a breakout year? Let me know. You can hit me up on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment in the comments. Let's have a conversation. But thank you guys for tuning in. That's all that I have for you guys today. Wherever you're getting your podcast, remember to hit like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. That's all that I got for you guys on today's episode, though. I'll see you next week to discuss the defensive side of the football. Until then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.